We know that dysfunctional politics can breed dysfunctional processes to try and force action where we simply can't get it otherwise. And that's what we have with the sequester, which we often fail to reiterate was designed not to happen. It was designed to be so horrific, so self-destructive, so stupid that no sane person could allow it to happen. There was a logical flaw in that, which is these sane people, but now it has happened. And unfortunately, what has also happened is that because a sequester, and remember we've seen one tranche of this with 9 to go, is not something that has the roof on fire, but has particularly voracious termites eating out the foundation of the society, went unnoticed for a long period of time. And frankly, one of our problems is a mass media that does not focus on much anymore except the immediate problem, that has not covered very effectively what this is doing to a whole series of important areas, and not just basic research. Let me turn first to you, Dr. Collins. As you see it from the inside, as I see it from the outside, one of the real problems here is that with basic grants being 5-year grants, and you get the sequester and the other pressures on the budget, what's going to happen is that new grants are going to be hit the most, and that is going to create a real devastating effect on getting young people moving through the system if they can't rely on those grants to do their research, to go elsewhere. Are you seeing this happen already? And is this at the root of some of the problem that we have?
If you have not seen it, look at the survey just issued by ASBMB, which looked at 3,000 scientists, asking them, what has sequester done to your experience? And here again, I get very inflamed when I see reports saying, well, the sequester didn't make any difference. Well, come and spend a day with me, and I'll show you what kind of difference it has made in the lives of people who are trying to pursue this noble enterprise. That survey pointed out that something like 55% of people they asked knew of a colleague who had lost their job because of sequester. Something like 80% of the people they asked said they were now spending a much larger proportion of their time just writing and rewriting and resubmitting and trying to get a grant funded because the pay line has fallen so far that your chances are so low. And so instead of doing research, you're just writing and resubmitting and going nowhere. Will not fund about 650 grants that were highly scored, were in the top 17%, and are not going to get funded because specifically of sequester. So don't tell me there has not been a consequence. Talk to those 650 applicants who thought they were going to get funded because they got a great review, and yet the answer is still going to be no. And for us to sit in a room like this and basically say, well, you know, it's the way politics goes, it's just unacceptable. If we really believe that this is a noble enterprise, that we're engaged in something that is as important as the health of you and your family and of the rest of the nation, and if it's the way we're going to pull our economy back out of some difficult spots, which the evidence is very strong for, we should be making a lot of noise. So make noise, people. I'm making noise. Come along, help me out here.
Victor, let me ask you, looking at it from the perspective of a university, and it's a private university, and you've got certainly a healthy endowment. It's one of the most successful. What kinds of pressures are you feeling, and how much of this is coming from what are both indirect and direct pressures from state government, from the federal government, and what from the larger problems in the society as we clamp down on costs?
You know, we are coming off a great year with the Nobel Prize on one hand and just Alaska on the other. They were federally supported research years ago. And the impact of those two discoveries, one, receptors that account for about 1,000 drugs that you make and others that save lives, and cochlear implant that helps you to hear, is phenomenal. And so when we think about, I completely agree with Francis, the best thing we have is people. And the best thing a university can do is innovation. The problem right now is our environment is not fully supportive of that. We have great people who work so hard. And just want to amplify some of the things that Franz talked about. Students, young people. I just look at our number. We have to contract our graduate student body by some 13% because of funding issues. And we are really seeing the perfect storm, because on one hand, you're looking at the need to transform care delivery altogether, and the other side will be sequestration. Now, so as you begin to do things differently, and I think that in fact the Affordable Care Act is taking us in the right direction, but a lot of uncertainties. We have to take tremendous amount of cost out. We're undergoing a cost reduction initiative for the next 2 years, take hundreds of millions of dollars out of our fundamental costs in order to be more competitive and being able to deliver care, according to what we should be doing, low cost.
Now, Tony and Bob, you run very successful pharmaceutical companies that have done a lot of research and cutting-edge research. Talk a little bit about how much the NIH work and the basic research done by government undergirds what you do. What if it went away? Would you still be able to do breakthrough drugs, and would the vacuum be filled?
Very few people recognize, people in this room of course, but very people outside of these circles recognize that this is an ecosystem that consists of, if you will, the top of the funnel at the NIH, which does the basic biological research that a company like ours or Bob's could never do. We can't scale it, we can't afford it actually. So we count on the NIH to fund the academy so that we can then take the learnings from the academy and translate those into new therapies and innovations that we can bring to patients. So that's the funnel end of it. Look at the later part of that, if you will, and if our companies span that bridge, there's the FDA portion of that specifically provides a gating mechanism for those new innovations and those new therapies out to patients. Then, of course, you have the final translation, which is the administration of care. Somehow we're not having the right conversation. Take one of our lead therapies, Nexavar, for liver and kidney cancer, and now under review for thyroid cancer, supported by 41 NIH grants. Now, I can tell you that if those 41 NIH grants had not existed in the 1990s, Nexavar would not be preserving lives and extending life around the world. Our latest therapy, Kyprolis, for the treatment of multiple myeloma, 8 NIH grants. Again, very clear evidence that this wide part of the funnel has been so critical and so important. So how is it that we can disconnect the politicization of this conversation and really get focused on the essence that it provides, both for the betterment of society, but more importantly, for the global economic power that this industry brings to this country? It's a simple, elegant, and beautiful argument, and one of the best value-creating industries in the world. And it should be that simple and that transparent for everyone that's 6 blocks away.
And I think that if we identify the virtuous cycle that exists when you invest in medical innovation, that upon the commitment of intellectual capital and financial resources to pursuing a grand challenge like controlling a hematologic malignancy, there's the Bernoullis Law actually plays a role here. That the faster we innovate, the more lift we create for the entire community. I've been delighted at how receptive and helpful the agency, the FDA, has been in this disruptive technology of cell therapy. Very engaging. Thank you very much, because we have truly benefited from this dialogue, and we see ourselves in a lot of ways as a partnership. I think that industry and NIH can advance their partnership dramatically, and the public will, I believe, see this as not only new ways to treat disease, improve lifespan, but also greater opportunity to improve the GDP as we not only do we extend life, but we're extending the useful life of recipients of these therapies. And they contribute effectively to our gross domestic product.
The case has been made that China's eating us for lunch with $305 billion they're going to spend over the next 5 years. George Will writes, we wrote the playbook and the rest of the year. So I like what we're saying, but I think where we land is what do we do next? And in looking at the voices on the panel, from industry to academia to government to patient advocacy, I would argue that probably the one today that's got to rise to the top of the chorus, and it's a chorus, not a Gregorian chant. We have different harmonic lines in what we sing to the same hymnal. But the one that needs to rise to the top is this era and age of patient centricity, and we are in it. So we have to decide what this conversation looks like to give the power to the patient voice, tie it to economic returns, and be leading the tough conversation so people understand that we get it and we're part of a force for change. And then you think about American public and the tax dollars. Would there be something like a campaign? My tax dollars, our tax dollars, our health, our lives, something where we did be bold enough to test this out and see if it would even hold water.
Let me throw out a couple of ideas and just see how you all react to them. One is that we shoot for the moon for something different, and that is, let's get an endowment for medical research. Let's find a way with dedicated revenues in a country where people are willing to pay a little bit more, and not to replace perhaps the annual appropriations or with some congressional control over it, but to provide a base and maybe focus some of our efforts not just on changing the dialogue to get people aware of where we're eating ourselves alive, but to turn in a positive direction.
If we look forward to the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, to the extent that we would rely solely on public-private partnerships as a stopgap, we'll be missing an important investment opportunity as a country. So I go back to your opening introductory comment, there are just some things government has to hold the responsibility for.
The question, your point about is it brain initiative, whatever, I think that's to be determined as our national priority. What areas do we want to work on? And that, for instance, is not to replace what we do every day in investigative-initiated research, but I think if the sectors come together to say, let's put our best mind, our money together, and really take some of the biggest topics together, I think that can make a huge difference. They already started doing that in Europe.
I think that we also need, as a community, to embrace the inherent riskiness of any disruptive transformational technology that will change the paradigm in a disease like Alzheimer's. There's no guaranteed payoff. At Celgene, we've a good example, our cell therapy business was a very risky undertaking. Celgene invested in this a decade before it really rose to the attention of big pharma. But with the uncertainty, we've embraced that riskiness, and it's created tremendous opportunity as well, including the advent of cellular immunotherapeutics for cancer, which now are far more relevant to what Celgene does than what we originally started with. So I just think that that's also another element of this.
First of all, the public-private partnership, we must be investing in these innovative ideas about how to work together between government agencies, FDA, NIH working more closely than in history. Likewise, the way in which FDA is working with other agencies. We're working with CMS. All of that is just critical. And working between public and private, we have an initiative to do target validation that is truly groundbreaking if it gets off the ground in the next month or so, focused on Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis. Really, as you said, bringing together the top scientists from both sectors to see what could we do together to identify the right targets for the next generation of drug development. This would be quite radical, and I think it is a fair chance it's going to come to pass.